Keanu Reeves walked through the quiet hallway of a luxury hotel in New York City, dressed in a simple black jacket and jeans, with his hair slightly messy and eyes calm. He didn't look like a superstar. He didn't act like one either. No flashy jewelry, no bodyguards, no loud entrance. Just a soft thank you to the bellboy and a polite nod to the receptionist. People working at the hotel liked him instantly. He was gentle, quiet, and respectful, just a man trying to live simply in a world that often loved noise. He was there for a private charity event. The hotel had been booked by rich businessmen, celebrities, and powerful people. There were fancy cars parked outside, laughter echoing through the lobby, and people showing off watches more expensive than small homes. But Keanu wasn't here to show off. He was there to support a children's cancer foundation quietly. He had donated a large amount anonymously as always, but not everyone liked Keanu's quiet presence. Some of the men at the event didn't recognize him or pretended not to. To them, he was the old Matrix guy, or worse, a nobody trying to stay relevant. They laughed when he passed, whispered rude things, and treated him like he didn't belong there. They expected him to beg for attention like everyone else. But Keanu stayed silent, smiling politely, not letting their words bother him. That evening, the elevator on the 32nd floor opened. Keanu stepped in alone, holding a small bag with books and snacks. He had no assistant with him, no one to carry his things. As the doors were about to close, 3 men rushed in. They were tall, loud, and dressed in expensive suits. One of them recognized Keanu. "Hey, you're that actor guy, right?" he asked, smirking. Keanu gave a small nod and said, "Yeah, I guess." The man chuckled. "Didn't know B-listers stayed in this hotel," he joked, making the others laugh. Keanu stayed quiet. The elevator started moving down slowly. Another man leaned close and said, "You don't talk much, huh? You do good for us?" Keanu shook his head gently. "No, I just don't like drama." "Too bad," the man said, pushing Keanu's shoulder. Slightly at first, it felt like a joke, a stupid rich guy prank, but then it turned serious. The tallest man pushed Keanu again, harder this time, making him hit the elevator wall. The third man grabbed the snack bag and tossed it aside, laughing like a bully in school. Keanu didn't fight back. He stood still, his hands at his sides. "Come on," one of them said. "Say something. Be a man." But Keanu didn't say anything. His eyes were calm, his breathing steady. He wasn't afraid. He wasn't angry either. He just looked at them like they were children throwing tantrums. That made one of the men even more furious. He punched Keanu in the side quick, sharp, painful. Keanu winced but didn't cry out. The elevator finally reached the ground floor. As the doors opened, the 3 men straightened their suits and walked out like nothing happened. One of them looked back and laughed. "See you at the bar, loser," he said. Keanu stepped out slowly, one hand holding his side, his lip bleeding slightly. A staff member passed by but didn't notice anything. No one saw what happened. No camera caught it. In that golden hotel filled with shining chandeliers and velvet carpets, Keanu Reeves had just been attacked and no one knew. He didn't go to the manager. He didn't ask for help. He picked up his bag, wiped his lip with a tissue, and walked toward his room. On the way, a cleaning lady smiled at him. "Long day?" she asked kindly. Keanu smiled back. "Yeah, but it'll be okay." She didn't see the bruise forming under his collar. Inside his room, Keanu sat on the edge of the bed and let out a deep breath. He wasn't thinking about revenge. He wasn't planning to tell anyone. He just closed his eyes and let the silence fill the space. He had known pain before. He had lost people he loved. He had seen life at its worst. This wasn't new. It hurt, yes, but it didn't break him. That night, while the hotel guests drank and danced, Keanu stayed in his room. No party, no spotlight. Just quiet music, a soft light, and a man thinking deeply. The world outside still thought of him as just an actor. But inside, something powerful was growing, a silent fire. They beat him in the elevator, yes. But what they didn't know was this. They had just touched a man who had already survived the worst the world could give. And this man? He would rise again stronger than ever. Keanu Reeves sat on the edge of his bed, staring at the floor, his hands still shaking slightly from the elevator incident. The room was quiet, but his thoughts were loud. The pain in his side was starting to build, and his lip was swelling. He didn't want to press it with ice. He didn't want to even look in the mirror. He wasn't ashamed. He was just tired. He thought about calling someone, but who? His manager would overreact. The police might not even believe him. And besides, those men were powerful, rich, important. They could twist the story. Say he started it. Say it was a joke. And there were no cameras in the elevator. No witnesses. Keanu laid back slowly, trying not to hurt the bruised part of his ribs. The ceiling fan spun above him, and for a moment, he let his mind drift. Better days. Days when he would ride his motorcycle through empty streets at night. Days when he would sit on a park bench with no one watching. But that peace always seemed to vanish. The next morning, he wore a cap and sunglasses and walked to the breakfast area of the hotel. He moved carefully, his body sore from the hits. He greeted the staff with a soft good morning, just like always. No one noticed anything strange. To them, he was still the polite, quiet man from the movies. But behind his smile was a storm. As he reached the coffee counter, he heard laughter. The same voices from the elevator. The three men were sitting at a table nearby, wearing suits again, acting like nothing had happened. One of them was telling a story to two women, and the others were laughing loudly. And he just stood there. Didn't say a word, one of them said, chuckling. Like a sad little statue. The others laughed even harder. Keanu didn't look their way. He poured his coffee slowly, trying not to let his hands shake. He wasn't afraid, but he was angry now. Not the kind of anger that makes you shout or fight. It was deeper, quiet, controlled, dangerous. As he turned to leave, one of the men noticed him. He smirked, raised his cup and said, "Morning, champ." Keanu gave a polite nod and walked away. He went back to his room, sat down again, and this time looked in the mirror. There was a purple bruise on his ribs, and his lip was still red. He stared at his reflection for a long time. This wasn't the first time life had tried to knock him down. He remembered losing his best friend, River Phoenix, to drugs when they were both young. He remembered how his daughter was stillborn. He remembered how his partner Jennifer Syme died in a car crash just 2 years later. He had already lived through more pain than most people could imagine. So why did this hurt so much? Maybe it wasn't the punches, maybe it was the cruelty. They didn't know him, they didn't care. They hit him because they could. Because he didn't fight back. Because he was quiet. But they didn't understand him. They didn't know that inside his silence lived a mountain. That night, Keanu skipped the dinner event. The guests drank champagne, posed for photos, and laughed loudly. But Keanu stayed in his room, thinking deeply. Something inside him had changed. He didn't want revenge. But he didn't want to remain quiet either. He didn't want to become bitter, but he also didn't want to let things continue like this. He sat down with a notebook and began to write. Not about the men, not about the pain, but about strength, about character, about rising when the world expects you to fall. He wrote pages and pages of thoughts. His hand moved fast, his heart even faster. For the first time in months, maybe years, he felt something come alive inside him again. It wasn't hate. It was purpose. The next morning, he called his agent. "Find me a story," he said. "What kind of story?" The agent asked. "One about a man who doesn't give up," Keanu replied. The agent was surprised. You haven't taken a new project in a while. I'm ready now. Keanu said. After the call, he went to the gym in the hotel. He didn't lift heavy weights or try to impress anyone. He just moved, stretched, breathed, one step at a time. He knew his body was hurting, but he also knew it would heal. Just like his soul had healed before. The hotel staff noticed him more now. The young man at the front desk said, "Sir, I really admire how peaceful you are." Keanu smiled. It takes practice. He didn't tell the young man that pain had been his teacher. Later that day, he walked past the three men again. They were sitting by the pool, sipping drinks, laughing. One of them noticed him and said loudly, "Don't worry, no elevator today." Keanu looked at them for a second. Just 1 second. His eyes said everything. Calm, cold, clear. They didn't laugh after that. Inside his room that evening, Keanu packed his bag. He was leaving the hotel early. He had no reason to stay. He had something bigger waiting, a new mission. They thought they had humiliated him in that elevator, but what they didn't know was this. They had awakened a fire in him. And the next time the world saw Keanu Reeves, it wouldn't be in pain, it would be in strength. Keanu sat alone in his home days after leaving the hotel, the lights dim, the windows open to let in the soft evening breeze, but his heart still carried a strange weight, not from the pain in his body, but from the memories that refused to fade. He didn't tell anyone about what had happened in the elevator. He didn't complain or seek attention. Instead, he kept it inside, quiet, like a secret only he could carry. He sat on his couch, holding a photo in his hand. It was a picture of him and River Phoenix, both young, both full of dreams. River was gone now, gone too soon. Keanu remembered the night he got the call. How his chest had felt empty for weeks, how he didn't speak to anyone for days. And then, years later, his daughter was born still. A tiny life that never even cried once, and before he could heal, Jennifer, his love, his partner, died in a car crash. Pain had always been a shadow in Keanu's life, but he had never let it make him bitter. Instead, he chose to keep walking. Step by step, smile by smile, always kind, always quiet. Many people called him the sad man of Hollywood, but they didn't understand him. He wasn't sad, he was deep. He had just lived too much loss to fake a perfect smile. But something about that elevator moment had shaken him more than he expected. It wasn't just the beating, it was the laughter, the way they mocked him, the way they didn't even see him as human. It reminded him of how cruel the world could be, especially to people who chose kindness over pride. He looked at his face in the mirror, his lips still slightly swollen. A small bruise on his side, now turning yellowish blue, healing slowly. "This," he whispered to himself, "is nothing." The next morning, Keanu woke up early, made a cup of tea, and went outside. He walked through the streets with a hoodie and cap on. No one recognized him, just the way he liked it. He passed a small park where an old man was feeding birds. Keanu sat on a bench nearby, watching the simple scene, and it gave him peace. Then a memory came back, when he hadn't thought about in years. He remembered being broke in the early days, living out of a suitcase, sleeping on friends' couches. One time, he had barely enough money to eat, and someone handed him a sandwich without asking anything in return. That one sandwich had stayed with him for years, not because of the taste, but because of the kindness. He smiled softly, realizing that maybe this moment, the elevator, the bruises, the silence, wasn't just pain. Maybe it was a sign, a reminder, that even he needed healing again. Maybe he had gotten too used to carrying his sadness alone. Maybe it was time to rise again, not just for himself, but for the people who looked up to him quietly, the fans who said, "Your movies gave me strength," or "You helped me during my depression." Later that day, he called a friend, not a Hollywood actor or a director, just an old friend from Toronto, someone who knew him before the fame. They talked for an hour about music, motorcycles, life, and pain. At the end of the call, the friend said, "You know, man, Maybe it's time you did something for you, not a movie, not a show, something for your soul. That idea stayed with Keanu. He began to write again, not scripts or scenes, but thoughts, deep thoughts. He started a private journal every day. He wrote a little about the elevator, about River, about Jennifer, about how sometimes silence hurts more than a scream. At night, he watched old martial arts videos, not to fight, but to study, to focus, to find balance again. He started waking up earlier, stretching, doing breathing exercises, not for looks, not for a role, but for inner peace. One day, while walking by the ocean, a small boy ran up to him and said, "Are you John Wick?" Keanu knelt down, smiled, and said, "Sometimes." The boy smiled and said, "You're my favorite, because you never give up." Keanu's heart softened. He ruffled the boy's hair and whispered, "That's the most important thing, never give up." That night, he sat by the window of his apartment, a notebook on his lap, and wrote those words down. Never give up, even when the world turns its back, even when the bruises don't show, even when no one sees your pain. Keep going. He knew then. This wasn't just about what happened in a hotel elevator. It was about life, about choosing to grow, not stay broken, about choosing strength over revenge, healing over hate. Keanu decided from that moment, he would not only rise, he would inspire others to rise with him. And not by shouting, not by making noise, but by doing what he had always done best, walking forward with quiet courage, because even though they beat him in the elevator, they could never beat what was inside him. Keanu sat on his living room floor with his legs crossed, the sunlight falling softly through the windows. Everything was quiet, just the sound of his breath and the pages of the notebook in front of him. For the past few days, he had been writing without stopping, filling page after page with thoughts, memories, emotions, not for a book, not for the public, just for himself. Something inside him had changed. The pain from the elevator beating was almost gone now, but what remained was something stronger, a clear mind, a deeper heart, a decision to do something more meaningful with his life. One morning, he picked up the phone and made a private call. The number belonged to a man who ran a martial arts school in Japan. Keanu had trained with him many years ago while preparing for a film. The man was not just a teacher, he was a master of balance, peace, and discipline. Keanu explained what had happened. Without naming names, he only said, "I need to return to the basics. I need to remember who I am." The master understood at once. "Come," he said. "The mountains are quiet. They will listen to you." A week later, Keanu was on a plane, not first class, not private jet, just a normal seat by the window. He wore simple clothes and carried a small backpack. No media, no photos, no noise, just a man traveling alone, trying to find something he had lost inside himself. The place he arrived at was peaceful, surrounded by trees, old wooden houses, and the sound of flowing water. There were no mirrors, no internet, no phones allowed, just people training, breathing, meditating, healing. The students there did not treat Keanu like a movie star. They treated him like one of them, a person learning, a person growing. Each day started before sunrise. They ran through the forest, practiced deep breathing, and trained in silence. No talking unless necessary, only action. Keanu worked hard. His muscles hurt. His body ached, but his mind was slowly clearing. Every movement, every breath, was like washing away the pain, the noise, the memory of being laughed at and hid in. That elevator, one evening, after training, the master sat beside Keanu by a small fire. He asked gently, "Why did you not fight back that day?" Keanu looked into the flames and said, "Because I don't want to be like them. I've seen what violence can do, and I've lost too much already." The master nodded. "Peace is not weakness," he said. "Peace is power under control." Keanu smiled, understanding more than words could say. As the days passed, Keanu became stronger, not just physically, but mentally. He had no anger in his heart anymore. The faces of those three men no longer brought rage. They brought clarity. because without them, he would not have come here. He would not have returned to himself. During training one morning, the master handed Keanu a wooden sword, a bakken, and said, "Let's see how calm your spirit is." They began a slow match, wooden blades tapping lightly, then harder, then faster. Keanu moved with grace, his breathing steady, his eyes focused. In that moment, he wasn't an actor, he wasn't a victim. He was a warrior of peace, a master. Stopped and bowed. "You have returned," he said. "Now, what will you do with your strength?" Keanu didn't answer right away, but inside he knew the path was becoming clearer. One afternoon, while meditating under a cherry blossom tree, Keanu thought about his fans, people from all over the world who looked up to him not because of fame, but because of his kindness, his humility, his silent strength. He thought of young people who were bullied, who felt weak, who thought staying quiet meant staying broken. He decided he had to show them something, not with words, but with action. He didn't need to post about it. He didn't need headlines. He needed a new project, a role, a story, a truth that would speak to others like him. People who carried quiet pain but still chose to walk forward. After a month, Keanu said goodbye to the mountain retreat. He bowed to every student and thanked the master. "You reminded me who I am," he said. "And who are you?" The master asked. Keanu smiled gently. "A man who keeps going." Back in the city, he walked differently, not faster, not louder, but more sure of himself. He wasn't just healed, he was ready. The noise of the world didn't bother him anymore. Because inside, he had built silence like a shield, the kind that no insult or punch could break. He met with his agent again. This time with clear eyes. "I want a role," he said. "A story that shows strength in silence, peace in chaos, kindness that never gives up." The agent nodded. "I think I have just the thing." And just like that, Keanu's next chapter began not as a star, not as a victim, but as a man who had gone through fire and come out glowing. The elevator moment would not define him, but the steps he took after it would inspire millions. The studio lights were soft, the camera still covered, and the air in the meeting room was heavy with silence. Keanu sat at a long table with a few writers, producers, and the director, all looking at him with quiet hope. They had written a film for him, a role that wasn't about action, wasn't about guns or revenge, but about endurance, about pain, and about rising after being broken. The director placed the script in front of him and said, "This character loses everything, gets beaten down, and people think he's finished. But he doesn't fight back with anger. He fights back with heart, with patience, with peace." Keanu looked down at the title page. The name of the movie was simple but powerful. Still Standing. He ran his fingers across the paper and said, "Let's make it." The next few weeks were intense, but different. This wasn't just another film for Keanu, it was personal. Every scene felt like it was taken from his life. The silent struggles, the quiet strength, the inner battles that no one sees. The world was going to see a version of him they never had before. In the movie, his character is a single father who loses his job, gets bullied by society, and faces constant rejection. Yet he never lashes out. Instead, he shows kindness where there is none, and hope where everything feels lost. He keeps getting knocked down, but every time he gets up again, not louder, but stronger. During the filming, there were moments when Keanu had to stop between scenes, not because he forgot his lines, but because the emotions were too real. In one scene, his character is pushed down in a subway station, and people walk past him without helping. While filming that scene, Keanu remembered the elevator, the laughter, the silence, the feeling of being invisible. He didn't need to act, he just felt. The crew noticed something special happening. They whispered to each other, "This isn't acting, this is something else. This is truth." Word about the film spread quickly in the industry. Critics became curious, fans grew excited. But Keanu didn't care about fame this time. He just wanted the story to touch people who had been through pain in silence. He wanted people who felt forgotten, bullied, or weak to look at this film and feel seen. During one break in filming, a young assistant came to him nervously and said, "Sir, I just wanted to say, I used to get bullied in school, and watching you every day on set, it gives me courage." Keanu smiled warmly and replied, "That means more to me than any award," and he meant it. When the movie was finished, the studio held a private screening for the cast and crew. The lights went out, and the screen lit up with Keanu's face, quiet and tired, but still moving forward. For 2 hours no one in the room spoke, not a single whisper. When the final scene ended and the credits rolled, the room was filled with tears. Even the toughest crew members had red eyes after the screening. The director hugged Keanu tightly and said, "You didn't just play this role. You lived it." Keanu nodded slowly and whispered, "It was already inside me." The movie was released quietly, no big posters, no loud interviews, just a simple trailer that said, "Sometimes the strongest people are the quietest." Within days, the film went viral. People from all over the world shared it online. Stories started flooding the internet, people sharing how they had been bullied, beaten, ignored, but found strength in staying kind. Many wrote, "This movie saved me," or "I felt like this movie saw my soul." One letter stood out to Keanu. It was from a teenage girl who wrote, "I was going to give up. Then I saw your movie, and I decided to try one more time." Keanu sat with that letter for hours, holding it like it was made of glass. The success of the film wasn't measured in money or awards, it was measured in hearts, and Keanu felt something deep inside shift again, something healing, something rising. One day, he was walking down a street in Los Angeles, wearing a hoodie and sunglasses as usual. A man stopped him and said, "Hey, you're the guy from Still Standing, right?" Keanu nodded politely. The man smiled, his eyes full of emotion, and said, "Thanks for showing the world that we don't need to shout to be strong." Keanu walked on, feeling lighter than he had in years. The world hadn't changed overnight, and the people from that elevator still walked free, still laughed loudly somewhere. But Keanu didn't care about them anymore, because now his story had touched millions. He had turned pain into power, silence into strength. And he had done it not with fists, but with heart. The movie Still Standing was now playing in theaters across the world. But Keanu wasn't walking red carpets or giving long interviews. He stayed in the background, watching quietly as the world reacted. His story had reached millions. People cried during the film. People whispered to each other afterward. Some sat in silence for minutes after the credits rolled. But what no one knew was that something else was happening behind the scenes. Something unexpected. Something that brought the elevator story back to the surface. A hotel staff member, a young woman named Elena, had worked the night Keanu was attacked. She had cleaned the hallway on that floor, and after the incident, she had heard those same 3 men laughing loudly in the bar. She hadn't seen the beating, but she had heard just enough of their cruel conversation to understand what happened. Back then, she had stayed quiet. She was scared to lose her job, scared those powerful men might retaliate. But after watching Still Standing in a small theater near her home, she couldn't hold it in anymore. She left the theater in tears, not because of the acting, but because she realized the story was real, that it was about him. So she wrote a letter, not to the press, not to a blog, but directly to Keanu's team. She didn't want attention or money. She just wanted to speak the truth, to say, "I was there, I'm sorry I didn't help." Keanu received the letter a few days later. He read it slowly, carefully, his heart heavy but calm. He didn't feel anger toward her. He felt something else, relief. Maybe, or closure. Someone else knew. Someone else had seen just a little of what had happened, and they cared. He asked to meet her in person. Not in a public place, just a quiet cafe. When she arrived, she was nervous, holding her hands tightly. But Keanu smiled at her kindly and said, "Thank you for your letter, it meant a lot." She apologized with tears in her eyes. "I should have spoken earlier, I was afraid." Keanu nodded. "It's okay. We all do what we can when we're Ready. The moment was soft, honest, healing. But word spread, as it always does. Someone from the hotel staff had leaked a copy of the letter to a reporter. And soon, headlines began to appear. Keanu Reeves secretly attacked an elevator. Silent star, hidden wounds. The media went wild. Fans were shocked, celebrities reacted, and suddenly, everyone wanted to know what really happened. The hotel where it happened quickly launched an internal investigation. And the three men were identified. One of them was a high-level executive at a major company. The other two were powerful investors. They denied everything, called it a misunderstanding, claimed it was a joke, said Keanu was exaggerating. But Keanu said nothing. He didn't go on camera. Didn't write a tweet. He remained calm, even when the world was loud around him. His silence made the story even more powerful. And people started to take sides, not against him, but against those who hurt him. People wrote online, even. Now he's not naming names, that's real strength. Others said, he's showing the world what quiet dignity looks like. The truth was, Keanu didn't need to fight those men anymore. They were already losing the respect of the public, losing the chance to hide behind power, because the world had seen enough. They had seen the bruises on screen, and now they knew they weren't fake. The film Still Standing was nominated for major awards, and Keanu was praised not just for his acting, but for his courage. One hosted a film event, even set on stage. Keanu Reeves didn't just play the role, he lived it, and he rose from it. Behind the curtain, Keanu watched with quiet eyes, hands in his pockets. He wasn't smiling big, but his heart was full, not because of the awards, but because of the messages he was receiving, everyday letters, emails, voice notes from strangers, thanking him for helping them heal. In one message, a man said, "I was attacked 2 years ago and stayed silent, but your story gave me the strength to finally speak." Another girl wrote, "I thought being quiet made me weak, but now I see it's a kind of power." Keanu knew then that his silence had become a voice, not loud, not angry, but clear, steady, and heard. One day, during a private charity event, a young boy came up to him, maybe 10 years old, wearing a suit too big for him. Holding a notebook, he said shyly, "Mr. Reeves, can I ask you something?" Keanu knelt to his level and smiled. "Of course," the boy whispered. "Did they really hit you?" Keanu paused, then nodded slowly. "Yes, they did." The boy asked again, "Did it hurt?" Keanu nodded. "Yes, it did." Then the boy asked, "So why didn't you hit them back?" Keanu looked into the boy's eyes and said gently, "Because sometimes the strongest thing you can do is walk away and still stay kind." The boy nodded as if he understood, then hugged him tightly. In that moment, Keanu felt something lift, like the last piece of pain finally floated away. He had faced the truth, let the world know, and stayed true to who he was. The elevator didn't break him, it woke up a fire in him, a fire that warmed others too. Keanu Reeves stood on the balcony of his home, looking at the city lights below. The world had changed around him. People were talking, not just about his film Still Standing, but about what it meant, about what he had faced quietly, about the kind of strength that didn't need fists, only heart. His story had started to become something bigger than him. News channels, interviews, podcasts, and even classrooms were talking about it. The topic was everywhere. Why do people stay silent when they're hurt? And is kindness weakness or strength? Many people who had never spoken before now came forward with their own stories. One morning, Keanu's manager called and said, "There's something I need to show you." She sent him a video link. It was a teenager from Canada, standing on a small stage at her school talent show. She was nervous but smiling. Then she began to speak. "This is a poem I wrote after watching Still Standing. It's about being hurt and still choosing to be kind." Keanu watched in silence. As the girl read her poem, her voice shaky but honest, the words touched something deep in him. At the end, the crowd clapped and stood, and the girl cried softly, holding her paper to her chest. Tears welled up in Keanu's eyes, not because he was proud of the movie, but because he realized now how far his quiet message had traveled. It had entered hearts he never knew, places he would never visit, and minds of young people who now felt strong because of him. His inbox was filled with thousands of letters, some typed, some handwritten, from soldiers, single mothers, bullied teens, teachers, and even prisoners. One man in jail wrote, "I was violent all my life. But after watching you, I realized peace is harder but better. I want to change now." Keanu knew this was more than acting. It was something sacred, and that made him think of something. He didn't just want to be remembered as an actor. He wanted to do more, quietly, but deeply. So without telling the world, he began a new project. He used the money from the movie to start a foundation, not under his name, not with loud press, just something called the Quiet Strength Fund. It would help people who had suffered silently, victims of abuse, school bullying, workplace violence, and emotional trauma, the kind of pain that doesn't show on the outside. He hired kind people, social workers, counselors, and trauma experts. He gave them freedom to work in schools, shelters, and small towns. One rule he gave them: help them the way you'd help someone you love. Soon, the foundation's work started changing lives. A girl who had stopped talking after being bullied began smiling again. A former gang member found peace through quiet meditation classes funded by Keanu's program. And a widowed mother received therapy for free after hiding her pain for years. But none of this was posted by Keanu. He stayed out of the spotlight. Whenever someone thanked him, he'd say softly, just passing it forward. At the same time, the three men who had attacked him were facing their own consequences. One lost his corporate position. Another stepped down quietly from public life. The third man disappeared from the news altogether. No one cheered their fall, but people noticed that the world now believed in accountability, even when justice came late and softly. One evening, Keanu was invited to a small event by a youth center. They wanted to honor him, not for his movies, but for his heart. He didn't want to attend, but the center's founder said, "The kids really want to meet you, especially one girl named Samira. She says your story gave her the courage to speak for the first time." Keanu went quietly, dressed in simple clothes, no cameras, no red carpet, just folding chairs and paper decorations made by children. When he entered, the kids gasped, not because he was famous, but because they had seen his pain, and they trusted him. Samira walked up slowly, holding a small notebook. She didn't say anything at first, just hugged him tightly, her hands shaking. Finally, she whispered, "I used to think no one would care if I disappeared. But then I watched your movie, and now I want to live." Keanu closed his eyes for a second, overwhelmed. He gently said, "I'm glad you're here. The world needs people like you." Later, as he sat among the children, he told them a simple story, not about films or fights, but about the first time he fell off a bike as a child, how he scraped his knee and cried, how his mother said, "Falling doesn't make you weak. Staying down does." The children listened, wide-eyed, and for that 1 hour, Keanu wasn't a Hollywood star. He was just a man who had fallen and stood up again. That night, while walking home under a quiet sky, Keanu looked up at the stars and smiled. His body still carried scars, his soul still remembered the elevator. But now he saw that moment, not as the end, but the start of something beautiful. He had not just healed, he had helped others begin their healing too. The sun was setting slowly, spreading orange and gold light across the sky. Keanu Reeves sat on a bench at a quiet hilltop. Far away from noise, far away from cameras. He closed his eyes and breathed deeply. The wind gently touched his face. It had been a long journey, from pain to peace, from being beaten in silence to becoming a voice for the unheard. He thought about that elevator again, not with anger, not with sadness, but with a strange calm. Yes, it had hurt. Yes, it had broken something inside him. But it had also started something new. If that moment had not happened, maybe he would still be going through life quietly, keeping his pain hidden, avoiding the past. never knowing how strong he truly was. Now that quiet pain had become his greatest gift. It had helped others, touched lives, and opened hearts. And most importantly, it had changed him. A phone in his pocket buzzed. It was a message from his assistant. A simple line. Another letter came today from a father who said your story helped save his son. Keanu smiled gently and replied, "Please send him my love." Letters like this had become normal, every day. People from different countries shared their pain with him. They didn't see him as a celebrity anymore. They saw him as someone who understood. Someone who had walked through fire and didn't burn, but grew. A journalist had once asked him, "Do you ever wish the elevator thing never happened?" Keanu had paused before answering. "I used to wish that, yes. But now I see it was a door, not a wall. The movie Still Standing had won awards. Yes, but that wasn't what stayed with him. What stayed were the faces, the voices, the stories of strangers who said, 'I didn't give up because of you.'" He had never wanted to be a hero, never wanted attention. That was why his foundation still operated quietly, helping hundreds every month, abused survivors, bullied children, lonely elders and wounded hearts. No big names, no fancy buildings, just kindness that moved like water, quiet but powerful. One day, Keanu visited a hospital where the foundation supported a small mental health center. The doctor took him to a young woman's room. She had tried to end her life months ago, but now she was recovering. Drawing pictures every day, the doctor said. Softly, "She watched your movie over and over. It helped her feel seen." Keanu didn't speak. He just walked to her side, looked at her drawings, pictures of quiet forests, strong people standing alone but shining. He left her a note before leaving. "You are stronger than you know. Keep drawing. The world needs your light." Moments like these meant more to him than anything else now. No trophy, no big film could match the feeling of helping someone rise again. As months passed, people slowly forgot the scandal with the 3 men in the elevator. They disappeared from the news. Their names faded. No one remembered what they did, but everyone remembered what Keanu did after. That was the power of quiet strength that stayed. One evening, Keanu got a call from his old martial arts teacher in Japan, the one who had trained him after the elevator incident. The old man's voice was soft but clear. "You did not fight them with your hands," he said, "but you defeated them with your soul." Keanu bowed his head, even though no one could see him. "Thank you, sensei," he whispered. The teacher said one last thing before hanging up. "You have become more than a warrior. You are now a guide." Keanu thought about those words as he stood at the window of his home, watching city lights blink like stars on earth. Maybe he wasn't meant to shout, to lead crowds, or to be loud like others. Maybe his purpose was just to walk gently and let others follow when they were ready. Later that week, he was invited to speak at a small school event, not for fame, just to sit and talk with students. He didn't give a big speech, he simply told a story. "There was a time," he said, "when I was hurt, not by strangers, but by people who laughed at my silence. I thought maybe I should hide, maybe silence was weakness. But then, I learned that silence can be the strongest voice, if it comes with truth and love." The students listened with wide eyes and open hearts. One girl raised her hand and asked, "What should we do when the world is mean?" Keanu smiled. Softly, "Be kind anyway," he said. "Not because they deserve it, but because you do." When the event ended, a teacher came up and said, "You may never know how many lives you've changed, Mr. Reeves." Keanu replied gently, "That's okay. As long as someone keeps walking when they feel like stopping, that's enough for me." That night, back home, he lit a small candle near a photo of River Phoenix. Beside it was another photo of Jennifer and their unborn daughter. He looked at them for a while, then said quietly, "I'm still standing." And in that moment, he wasn't just a man who had survived loss, pain, and cruelty. He was a man who had transformed it all into light. They had beaten him in the elevator, but he returned stronger than ever, and through his strength, he helped others rise too.